video we're going to be talking about communication in construction. I'll be referring to my notes from time to time. If you see me looking down here, that's what I'm doing. First off, I want to talk about the importance of communication. Communication really is the transferring of ideas. If I have an idea in my mind and I want to get that idea into your mind, there needs to be some means, some way of me transferring my idea from my mind into your mind. And the way that I transfer that idea is through communication. There's very, very many different ways of communication. For example, a perhaps crude example is if a gentleman, or perhaps not a gentleman, is looking at my wife, and I don't like that. And so I have the idea in my mind that he shouldn't be looking at my wife. One means of communication is to take my fist and to drive it into his face. Now, that would be a way of me communicating that I don't think he should be looking at my wife. So not all communication is going to be written or verbal communication. There's various ways that we communicate. Communicating really is simply the transference of ideas from one person to another person. Now there's barriers in communication, and this is something that as professionals we need to understand. Barriers that exist in communications. If we want to be a communicator, we need to overcome some barriers. And being a communicator is very much part of being a professional construction manager. Attitude is a big barrier. For example, if you're trying to communicate to an employee a task that the employee must do, and the employee has an attitude towards you or towards another employee, it may be more difficult for you to communicate to that individual what needs to be done. Same if you're working with a subcontractor or with a design professional or the owner of a building. If there's an attitude problem, that's going to become a barrier to communication. Now, a lot of times we can't do anything about somebody else's attitude. Most of the time we can't. If an employee of ours has an attitude against us or an architect has an attitude with us, there's not a lot that we can do to change that person's attitude directly. But there is a way that we can take account of that attitude and then make the means of our communication a little bit different so that that attitude does not present such a barrier to communication. Another barrier to communication is poor language skills. You know, if we talk like hillbillies, sometimes it's more difficult for people to understand us. And in this type of business environment that we're in now, oftentimes we work with architects or engineers that are from New England or from the West Coast or from the Midwest. And they have different terminology for certain things. And we need to understand a little bit of the terminology difference, but also the slang and the types of words they use for different things are different. So the best route is if we can use good language. Also, in this area in South Texas where we're at here, we have what we call Tex-Mex, where a lot of us are bilingual. We speak both English and Spanish. And oftentimes when we're speaking, the sentences that we use, we mix both English and Spanish words into the sentence. That can be dangerous for communication, especially when talking to somebody who's not bilingual. But even when talking to another bilingual person, many times words that we use have different meanings, especially in Spanish, where some words in Cuba have a different meaning in Mexico, or they have a different meaning in Central America and in Spain. So Spanish is a very, very difficult language to communicate efficiently in. And so if we're working in the United States, it's best to try to do all of our business transactions and all of our communication in English, because English is a little bit better language when you compare the variance in it. Now, the English, of course, varies a little from Australia and Britain, but within the United States, it's very little difference, really, from California to New York. The differences are much smaller than when you compare the differences in Spanish between Argentina and Cuba, or between the Dominican Republic and Colombia, for example. There's some significant differences there. So we try to stay away from the Tex-Mex communication when we're speaking in this part of the country. The other is misunderstanding. A lot of times we say something to somebody, and our words that we use have specific meanings that we have attached to them. But those same words have different meanings to the individual that's listening to us. And so they don't understand. We tell them to do something, and they go out and they think they're doing what we've told them to, but they're not, because they didn't understand what we're saying. And so misunderstanding is a barrier in communication also. And we can overcome that most of the time by asking questions. Do you understand what I'm saying? I want you to do this. How do you plan on doing it? And getting feedback from them, so that we are checking with them to make sure that they're understanding what we're trying to say. And then there's poor listening skills. It goes hand in hand a lot with the misunderstanding. People aren't listening to us, or they have preconceived ideas of what we think or what they think we're going to say, and so they're not listening real well. Terrible listening skills are often shown when somebody's on the telephone. They're doing other things and they're on the phone and they're not listening real well. When we listen, we really need to dedicate ourselves to the task of listening. When somebody's speaking to us, we need to dedicate that time to listening to that person and trying to understand that person. Because, again, we may misunderstand what they're saying. So if they're not asking questions of us to make sure that we understand them, we need to ask questions of them. So this is what you mean, this is what you want to say. Ask for clarification. Try to refine those listening skills and dedicate that time to listening. Because sometimes we want to think that we're efficient, that we can clean up the office, or that we can type a letter, or that we can look at some plans, or we can do a quantity takeoff or something at the same time that we're listening to somebody. And we think that's efficient, doing two things at once. But really, we need to stay away from that. Listening is a task in and of itself. And if we are doing anything while we're listening, it should be taking notes of what the speaker is saying. Because poor listening skills is definitely a barrier in good communication. I want to talk a little bit about written communication now. Written communication is something that we're involved with in this industry quite a bit. I'm going to talk about letters, faxes, and emails. These are pretty common. We also have written memos that are a little bit different than letters, faxes, and emails. Okay. 3 primary things in written communication that people are going to look at, and that they're going to judge us, or our communication is going to be effective or ineffective based on these 3 things. And the first one I'm going to list is organization. How is our email, or our letter, or our fax organized? The second one is going to be emphasis. Okay? And what is the emphasis of our email or our fax or whatnot? The next one that I'm going to talk about here is tone. What is the tone of the email or the fax or the letter? First off, in the organization, direct communication, we want to be talking about the subject. When that person gets that fax or they get the letter and they look at it, the first thing they want to know is, why is this person writing to me? Subject. Let's get that subject out there. Unless it is a letter of persuasion, then we're going to take a little different route, and we're going to talk about that later on in this video. Okay, get the subject out. What's the issue? What are we talking about? What needs to be done? What is the time frame? And what are the consequences of not getting it done? Okay? Let's look at that. First, what is the issue? What is the issue? What are the needs? What needs to be done? Time frame. What type of time frame do we have? And consequences. What are the consequences? Now, depending upon the type of letter that you're sending or the situation that you're in, you may not want to address all these issues right at the first time. Say, for example, you're writing to a subcontractor, and the subcontractor is performing less than quality work. You may just want to address the issue and let the subcontractor come to the solution. Let him come to the conclusion of what the needs are, the time frame, consequences. Or you may just want to address the issue in the time frame. Or you may want to address the issue needs time and not address the consequences right away. These are the 4 basic ingredients of our subject. Or we're writing to the architect, or we're writing to the owner for some reason, or we're writing to an engineer, or we're writing to a material supplier. Whatever the case might be. We want, right in the beginning, they want to say, why is this person sending me this email? Why am I receiving this fax? Let's give them the issue, the needs, time frame, the consequences. Okay? Then we're going to place an emphasis on something. And the emphasis is going to be placed on one of these 3 things, really. The issue, the needs, the time frame, or the consequences. The needs may be, you need to respond in this way, and that might be our emphasis. You need to respond in this way. You need to do this thing. Or it may be, I need to do this thing, and you need to let me. Or you may place the emphasis upon the time, because, for example, the contractor or a subcontractor may have no dispute that he needs to tape and float the walls, for example. But the problem is the time. He's only sending you 2 guys and you need 12. So that may be the issue, is the time. Or worst case comes to worst case, you may want to focus on the consequence. Say this gets done or this is going to happen. That's your emphasis. Your tone. The words you use is going to play a large part in the tone of your letter. Are you angry? Are you working in a cooperative spirit? Are you bitter? Are you nervous? These things are going to express in your tone. The other thing that you can do to express the tone is make letters bold, capitalize all the letters in certain words, or if you're sending an email, for example, you might color certain letters, a certain sentence, you might make that in red letters, or you may make it in green letters or something where it stands out from the rest of the letter or the document that you're sending. This is ways that you can make the tone of a letter a certain way. Now, you want to ask yourself a few things when you are writing a letter. What is your desired outcome? Because that's going to affect how you put the letter together. What are you trying to make happen? Who will be affected? When this fax or this email is received, who's going to be affected? That person is going to talk to other people. And people are going to be affected. Is somebody going to call your boss? Is somebody going to call the architect? Is the owner going to get contacted? Are the employees on your job site going to get contacted? What's going to be the effect of that document that you're sending? And then you may ask yourself, peer review. What would your peers think? The other project managers or other project superintendents or inspectors or other people employed by your company. What would your peers think if they read this letter? How would they grade it? What would they think of your means of communicating? And how does it reflect on you? Does it make you look like a bitter person? Does it make you look like somebody that really doesn't know how to write, doesn't know how to spell, doesn't know how to organize a letter? Does it make it look like somebody that really doesn't have their act together? How does it reflect on you? Some of these things are ethical questions, and if you're have a little of a religious background, one of the things you see a lot of the young people wearing today, and something that's sold in a lot of these Christian jewelry stores, is these "What would Jesus do?" And that's the WWJD. What would Jesus do? And in essence, this is a question that we're asking ourselves, because yes, we want to be effective managers. We want to produce a fine quality building on schedule for the owner. We want this owner to be able to feel good about hiring us as their contractor, and we want this owner to talk to their friends, and so that when their friends want to do buildings, they want to come and they talk to us. Obviously, this is the goal of building, is to please the customer and to build the job in a quality, efficient manner on schedule. And in order to do that, a lot of times we've got to ruffle feathers. We've got to get subcontractors to do things that they may not want to do, or do them in time frames that they may not want to do, or push material suppliers to expedite materials to get them to our jobs before they're getting them to jobs from other companies. So it's managing is really a people business, working with people, getting people to do what they need to do. And the way that we do that is communication. We need to learn how to communicate. So when we're writing letters and we're writing faxes, sometimes we may have to step on toes. But let's ask ourselves, is it necessary? Can I try the nice guy approach the first time? And if that doesn't work, then maybe I need to go to a little tougher position. One of the very important documents that we have to handle in construction are RFIs, and that stands for Request for Information. Now, in another video entitled Advanced Communication, we're going to look at RFIs a little more in depth, but I wanted to touch them on here. When doing an RFI, we really want to make the design professional's job easy, because a complaint that I hear a lot from project managers and from superintendents is they do an RFI and the architect or the engineer, they just take forever to answer the thing. And they say, I send it to them, and days and days and days pass by, and then we have our monthly meetings or our bi-weekly meetings, and we bring it up, and they kind of stutter, and yeah, I'll get around it, I got to look into it, blah, blah, blah. And they take so long. And so what we want to do as construction professionals is make the design professional's job easy, so that when they get their RFI, they can answer it without having to spend a lot of time and thought on it. One of the ways we do that is, on our RFI, we put the plan page number. What page number are we talking about? Are there multiple page numbers? Put the detail number. What details are we looking at on the plan? So that the architect doesn't have to hunt through the plan to see what we're talking about. Put the section number of the specification on there, so they can go right to that specification number. If there's a paragraph number, put the paragraph number there, so they can quickly reference what we're talking about. Try to make their job easy that way. If the problem involves something that's on the site, we can take a digital picture and we can attach that picture, perhaps send an email to them regarding this RFI, and perhaps we're doing our RFIs through email, which is wonderful. Attach a digital picture so then they can look at the problem and see the problem just really instantly, and give a suggested solution. The easiest thing for an architect, when they get an RFI, they've got the plan page number, the spec number, they can look, they see the problem. If they've got a digital picture, they look at that, they got a suggested solution, yeah, that looks good. They date it, sign it, and send it back. And like that, you got your RFI back. So a big part of doing a good RFI is trying to make that job for that architect or that engineer an easy job. And when doing these, let's try to use good grammar and good language skills. I read an RFI once where the superintendent had sent to the architect asking him a question about something needed to be added to the project in order to make it work, and he wrote on there, this needs to be added, and we need to know who's going to fork up the dough. Well, fork up the dough may not be the proper terminology, and that reflects on that superintendent. Now that architect reading that, he's going to make certain judgment calls on that superintendent and think, fork up the dough, where'd this guy go to school at? What kind of guy is this? And when that architect comes out to inspect that job, because this guy's using questionable language in his RFIs, that architect's going to look a little closer at that job. He's going to pick out more mistakes, be a little more finicky. And when he makes that punch list for a superintendent like that is likely to be longer than a punch list for a superintendent that has very good language skills and is presenting himself in a professional manner. So our words have consequences, and we are judged by our words. So it's very important that we try to use good language skills when writing these RFIs. Otherwise, we're going to have to suffer the consequences, and we may not like those. I'd mentioned phone calls earlier and the poor communication skills that often take place with phone calls. Well, one thing that we should do with phone calls, because it's verbal communication, and verbal communication is just so open to interpretation, it's tough. You know, you call up a subcontractor, or you have a conversation with the architect, and they say certain things, and later on, when you do something, and then you're saying, well, this is why I did it, because you told me this, and they say, well, that's not what I told you. And it's just so open and ambiguous that it's really best to state a written communication if you can. If you have a phone conversation that's an important conversation, you're receiving a directive from an architect, or you're giving a directive to a subcontractor, if you can follow that up with something in writing, email's excellent. It's an excellent tool to have a computer out on the job site with email, so you can follow up these phone conversations with a real quick email. This will follow up to this conversation. I'm acknowledging that you directed me to do this. Or this will follow up to this conversation. I'm clarifying that this is what I directed you to do. Or this is what we agreed upon. Because email is just so casual. It's casual correspondence that the people don't feel so offended like you're writing them a formal letter. And yet it is documentation, and it's something that we can support what we've done. The other thing that can be done is a phone log, which sometimes is more of a hassle, where you write down the time of day and the date and the gist, this kind of summary of your phone conversation and what was done there. And so, you know, because it's verbal communication, you want to practice those listening skills, ask for clarification, or give clarification. If you're the one that's speaking, you give clarification, or you ask the listener certain questions to make sure that the listener is understanding what you're trying to say. Now I want to talk a little bit now about direct communication. That's face-to-face communication. When you're talking to somebody and you're looking them in the eye, or you're standing in front of them. Now this is, again, we are judged by the way we communicate. And when you're standing in front of a architect, or the owner comes on site, or city inspector or something like that, and you're kind of hee-hawing around and not really conducting yourself in a professional manner, they're going to think, what kind of joker is this? And that city inspector, he's going to think, man, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. What's he doing out on this job? How'd he get this job? And he's going to inspect your job very thoroughly, because he's going to judge that you're incompetent because of the way that you're conducting yourself. Nonverbal communication. It's like the example I gave at the beginning of plowing your fist into somebody's face. That's nonverbal communication. And nonverbal communication is very, very important. It tells people a lot about who we are. We can put off emotions that communicate to people how we're feeling by the way we look, our expressions. Defensiveness, for example. Nervousness, or if we're being cooperative. If we feel confident, or if we feel insecure. If we feel frustrated. These emotions can be communicated to somebody by the way we're acting, by the way we look, our gestures, or how we might compose ourselves. Another issue is appearance. If you come to work in a t-shirt, maybe you got a t-shirt on with a heavy metal rock and roll band on there, or some country western twanger on there, some concert that you went to. and you got your blue jeans on, and they're hanging down halfway over your rear end, and you go out and you think you're going to run a project site like this. You think that the foremen are going to look at you and respect you and consider that you have some authority and that you have some knowledge. Compare that to the superintendent that shows up every morning in clean clothing. He may have slacks on, or he has something like Levi Dockers, something semi-casual. He's wearing a belt. He's got either a polo shirt on or it's a button-up shirt. Sometimes he may wear a tie if the climate allows him to. And he projects an image of somebody that's got his act together, somebody that's knowledgeable, somebody that has command, somebody that has authority. And the subcontractors react to that, city inspectors react to that, architects react to that, owners react to that. That's nonverbal communication. The way we dress, our hygiene. You come to work, you don't brush your teeth, you got bad breath, your hair's all a mess. Or if you're female and you painted your face to look like some type of teenager that's just learning how to put on makeup or something. These things, we're judged by these things. And so we want to really take note of our appearance. Sometimes it helps, oftentimes it helps, if you're going to have a meeting with an architect or if you're going to confront a subcontractor, to actually practice beforehand. I know in some construction companies, they're going to have a meeting with an architect, the project manager and the superintendent, they get together and they play roles. The project manager says, I'm the architect, throw me questions. And the superintendent practices asking the project manager questions. And then they reverse roles, and the superintendent says, I'm the architect, you're the project manager, ask me questions. And then they start asking questions, and they're practicing their communication. So then when they come to the meeting, they're prepared. Is it worth that much? It very well may be. How many projects have finished late because of the architect? I'd say a lot. And who pays for it? I have never heard of an architect writing a check to a general contractor because the architect delayed the project. And yet, for every week that it's delayed, pay the superintendent more, pay the electric bill, pay the rent for the trailer, the porta potties, the trash removal, the bill goes up, and at the end of the job it gets really expensive, because on these big projects you turn on that air conditioning and heating system and you're paying bills $4,000 to $10,000 a month, and that architect's dragging his feet making your job last longer. Who's paying for that? Yes, indeed, it is important that we work with the architects. We want a friendly relationship, but we also want to keep them from delaying our project. They can delay our project probably easier or just as easy as a subcontractor can delay our project. And we want to avoid delays because delays cost money. I'm going to talk a little bit about a persuasive letter right now. How do you write a persuasive letter? Because persuasive letters is where we're trying to get somebody to do something that we want them to do. I'm going to use an example here of writing a persuasive letter to an architect. And in this example, the architect has specified stamped concrete, but because of a situation that's beyond our control, stamped concrete is going to delay our project. Either the subcontractors that do that are too busy, or the ready-mix companies don't have the stained concrete, or the color that they want is got a long lead time, or whatever the case might be. Our interest is to get the architect to allow us to use brick pavers instead of using stained concrete. In a persuasive letter, the first thing in the persuasive letter, unlike the direct memos and faxes, emails that I was talking about, where you come right out in the beginning and you say, this is the subject, this is the issue at hand, we need to use brick pavers instead of stained concrete. No, that's not the issue. First off, you want to gain the attention. Gain attention. Okay? But you don't come out and say, you're a blubbering buffoon. Well, that's not the way you want to gain the attention. This is a persuasive letter. You may want to say something about the project is scheduled. The project currently is running on schedule. And we are very pleased with the relationship we've had thus far. Or the project is currently running slightly behind schedule, or a lot behind schedule, and we are concerned about being able to finish on time, or we are concerned about the completion date of the project, or something you want to give to gain their attention, but not to set off a red flag, so to speak. Most of the time, if you say the project is going on schedule, the architect already knows that. If the project is slightly behind or greatly behind schedule, the architect already knows that. You're not going to wave a red flag by saying something like that, unless for somehow you had hidden that from the architect, and he's going to find out eventually. And then what we want to do is build interest. Okay, we're going to propose something, and we want him to go along with it, or her. And so now we start to build interest. First we gain their attention, build interest. Project is slightly behind schedule. We have been looking at the schedule and how we might complete the project on time. That's gaining his interest. It's a little behind schedule, but the contractor has an idea of how to finish it on time. And so then the next thing is state the benefit. I got those mixed up there. But let's state the benefit either to the owner the first time. State the benefit either directly or indirectly. What is the benefit to the owner or to the architect for what you're going to propose? Okay, project is run slightly behind schedule. We've been reviewing the schedule to see how we might correct this. We believe that there is a way that we could correct and stay on the schedule and finish on time so that the owner will be able to occupy his building as he did, at the date that he expects to. So then we want to reduce resistance. Why might an architect not want to change to concrete pavers from stamped concrete? You know, maybe he's been doing stamped concrete for quite a while and it's a signature of his. That's going to be something hard to overcome. Yeah, maybe it's more affordable. Okay, and in which case, reduce resistance. If stamped concrete is more affordable than brick pavers, we could say our solution would add no additional cost to the owner. That could be reduced. This will speed up the schedule. That's a benefit. Well, really what we're trying to do here is reduce his resistance. So whatever we're trying to propose, we're trying to give indirect or direct benefits that for the architect or for the owner. Then what the last and final step is to motivate a response. Okay. Tie all this together. Stating the benefit, reducing the resistance, motivate the response. Okay, we're trying to get the architect to do something that he may not want to do. If we say this is industry standard, or many of the commercial buildings in this area, they have its pavers, and this is something commonly done, or whatever the argument might be. You know, it's a persuasive letter. And really, we wait for the punchline, for the end of the letter. It's kind of beating around the bush. This is what we want you to do. We're going to gain your attention, we're going to build your interest, we're going to tell you the benefits, we're going to reduce your resistance, then we're going to tell you what we want. So this is completely backwards from a direct letter. It's a persuasive letter. And oftentimes project managers write more persuasive letters than superintendents. But sometimes superintendents are getting involved with the persuasive letters. And so it's something that both project managers and superintendents, or if you're into estimating, sometimes when you're bidding jobs, you want to get the architect to change something that's specified and bid the job that way, and so you have to write persuasive memos, persuasive letters, persuasive emails, whatever the case might be. Now I wanted to finish this up on something very important, something that we all struggle with because of time, and that's proofreading and revising. Read that memo through, or read that letter through at least once. Does it say everything that you want it to say, or have you misspelled words? Are there typos there where you're going too fast and you miss some letters? Do you have sentence fragments? Do you have run-ons? Is it too wordy? Are you repeating yourself? Is there unnecessarily redundance or repetition in your letter? What about spelling and grammar? Computers are great, and that's another reason that computers in the field are awesome. Because if you use programs, word processors, most all of them, Microsoft Word probably the most common right now, they have grammar checks, they have spelling checks. And even if you didn't major in English in college, or it wasn't your favorite class in high school, a lot of times those spelling checks will pick that up. But have an English dictionary around, because sometimes those spelling checks pick up a word and we spelled it so bad that it's not even giving us the correct spelling, and we've got to look through the dictionary. And sometimes they're not perfect. It's best if we can improve our spelling. I'll give you an example. I misspelled invitation once on a bid. I sent out an invitation to bid. I misspelled invitation. I used Microsoft Word, and Microsoft Word spell check did not pick up that invitation was spelled wrong. The guy that programmed the computer didn't program it right. So it was clearly misspelled. The way I spelled invitation, it was not another word, so it's not like I had spelled there T-H-E-R-E when I wanted to spell it T-H-E-I-R. So it wasn't something like that, but those are common too. Oftentimes I see letters come across where people use to. They write to like this instead of writing it to. This form of to means also. And this form of to is nothing but a preposition. We want to do this, and we want to do this too. Also. That's a very common mistake. Another common mistake, I see a lot of people that spell a lot as one word. A lot is two words. So how do you become a better speller? I'll really tell you the way you become a better speller. You can go back to school, which isn't real practical for most of us, or you can read. Shut off the TV at night. Spend time on the internet reading if you want, although that might not be the best. If you're in chat rooms and forums and stuff, you may not be reading the best language there, especially everybody's typing so fast. Sometimes that's the worst language. Newspaper, that's normally 6th grade level. Pick up a book. Especially if you're a manager, buy some books on management, or buy some books on construction technology. Or if you like reading novels, just reading novels is going to improve your vocabulary. It's going to improve your spelling. Just reading. Reading improves spelling. And when I was a kid, what they always told me was, readers are leaders. So shut off the boob tube, pick up a book. It's going to help you out in your communication skills. Punctuation. Let's put those periods where they need to be. Run-on sentences, that's where you get two sentences crammed into one. You get a bunch of ands and buts and all those. Something like, We need to start the sheetrock and we need to start taping and floating, but we have a problem because our material has not arrived yet and we think it might be next week before it'll arrive. Period.
That's it.
Let's stay away from the ends and the buts and the all those and put those periods in there. Make separate sentences. And questions. You know what questions need at the end of them? They need question marks. Oftentimes I've seen lots of questions without question marks. Capitalization. Pronouns like he and she, us, we, them do not need to be capitalized unless they begin a sentence. However, if they refer to a deity, such as God, we capitalize them. For example, if we say, I will pray to him every day, for example, then we capitalize him because it refers to a deity, refers to God. Also, if we use the pronoun in place of a proper noun is a name, then we capitalize it. For example, if we are referring to the architect and we use the word architect instead of using the architect's name, the architect has directed us to do this. Then we use a capital A on that because we are referring to the architect or we're using that word architect as a proper noun instead of using his name. We could also, if the architect's name is Joe Smith, we could say Joe Smith has told me to do this. But instead of saying Joe Smith, we say the architect. So in that situation, we normally capitalize the architect, the engineer, the owner, the subcontractor. Because we're using those in place of a proper noun. And of course, proper nouns receive capitalization. If you spell somebody's name, you capitalize the first letter in it. So sentence fragments is another area, and we get sloppy. What does every sentence need? A fragment is only part of a sentence. What does every sentence need? It needs a noun, it needs a verb. Jack ran is a sentence, 2 words. Jack ran, that's a sentence. But we get sloppy, and we write sentences like this. Ceilings too short. Too, T-O-O, not only does it mean also, but it also is used like if it's in excess, excessive. Ceilings too short. Where is the verb? The ceilings are too short, right? Building not square. Where's the verb? Building is not square, right? Dimensions are not right. Dimensions are not right. So we want to use complete sentences, not fragments. Because remember, when we use fragments, or when we have run-ons, we are judged. Absolutely, we are judged by the words we use. And we want to be judged as professionals. We want to be judged as competent. Clearly, not everybody in construction has a college degree. And I'll tell you, not everybody with a college degree knows how to conduct themselves as a professional. However, you don't need a college degree to be a professional. What you just need is a little tact, a little self-control, a little discipline, and a little knowledge.